Welcome, everyone. My name is Andy Smith. I am the content lead at Kontakt.io. We are the AI care operations platform that hospitals run on. Very excited today. We have an amazing conversation. Obviously, we're going to be talking about moving beyond mobile Duress buttons, elevating the caregiver experience. Joining us today, we have Philip von Gilsa, the CEO of Kontakt.io, and Mary Beth Kingston, who served as the Executive Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer for Advocate Health. She also served on the American Hospital Association's Board of Trustees, chaired the Hospitals Against Violence Advisory Board, and while working as a CNO at Advocate Aurora Health, Mary Beth Kingston served as president of the AONL. Welcome, Mary Beth. Welcome, Philip. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Andy. Mary Beth, every time I read your CV, I will admit we've been working together now for some time. I still don't know all the positions, and I'm very confident there's still more roles that you are,
Well, some of
chairing or
them,
you
some of
have
them
been
occurred
chairing.
through mergers, so it does get a little confusing.
I think, in summary, you are, I think, the or one of the experts in the field that I think can talk very, very passionately and very, very deeply about the entire domain of staff safety, which is kind of the first part, of the conversation. But throughout all of our conversations, I think you are also a visionary, kind of seeing how are things going to evolve to ultimately, lead to better care outcomes, driven by better experiences for the people providing, the majority of the care, which is, the nursing staff and the people on the front line. And so, kind of, summing up and citing some of the conversations we've been having, everyone knows, and I think it's not a debate by any means, that staff safety and providing, as part of that, nurses with a durable duress a button is kind of table stakes. But if you zoom out for a second, how do you today think about nurses and what it takes to deliver the best possible care throughout the eyes of serving nurses, first and foremost?
Well, thanks for those kind comments. I'd love to say I have the answers. I have some thoughts and some observations, but don't think I have quite all the answers yet. But a few things that we do know, as you said, and we'll talk a little bit more about safety as we go through this. But one thing is that we do know that when nurses are able to spend more time with patients, whether it's in the inpatient setting, whether it's in home care, whether it's in the ambulatory setting, when they can spend more time with patients, their job satisfaction is increased. When
Yeah.
they can't spend time with patients and they feel they're not able to do the things that are important to patients, then they experience something that we call moral distress. And it really disenfranchises them from what they're doing. And in many cases can cause people to leave a position or even leave the profession. So it can have profound impacts if nurses are not able to have the time to do the care that they know, and to work with patients when they know it makes such a difference. So I think that's a big piece of it. The other thing is there's a lot of pieces to that. One thing is there's a lot of friction points, and how do we decrease those points? I always used to say when I was at the bedside, if I was busy, things happen. We're working with people. If I was busy comforting a family that I didn't anticipate, or a patient was having a change in their condition, that's part of the job. But if I was spending time looking for equipment, if I was spending time looking for coffee or a tea or something like that, not that that's not important to the patient, but it wasn't really what I felt I should be doing as a nurse, and added or took away time that I was unable to spend with patients. So I do think that's a huge piece of it. And, we're hoping technology can help us with some of that, creating an environment where nurses can do the things that nurses need to do, and we can augment with technology or with other team members that are better equipped to do some of the other roles. that's one piece. I have other thoughts too, but we'll stop
No,
there.
and I want to decode this, but kind of split the conversation in two. I think we have, the one track, which is the overall objective is to spend more time with patients, and how can technology, help move from administrative tasks to essentially patient contact time. And I want to, hold on to that thought in a second and go to the first topic you've mentioned, which is really the core of staff safety and all the different initiatives that are currently being implemented in order to create a safer, workplace as a whole. And if you think, and this kind of goes beyond also what we're doing at Kontakt.io, but what do you think in, the year 2025, going into the year 2026, are sort of the things that any competitive workplace environment needs to address and needs to invest in order to continue to be competitive in the future?
Oh boy, let me count the
About
ways.
the safety domain, and then we'll expand it
Yeah.
to,
There are so many different pieces that have to come together. A mobile duress or a safety button, however we want to term that, is really important. And I think almost everyone's moving to some type of way to utilize what we would say is an alarm to raise the alarm. But this is happening, sometimes it can happen proactively, but many times it's happening as someone recognizes they're in a situation. So I'm in a situation where I believe I'm in some way potentially going to be harmed, or I am in a situation where it's moving in that direction and I need support. There are things that have to happen prior to that, and so many of them. One is training. And I have to credit a colleague of mine, Karen Garvey, who's at Parkland down in Texas. And she always says, if you as a care provider respond up here to a patient's interaction, and the patient's behavior is here, that patient will quickly rise up to meet you. So training is really important. And I think that's again, table stakes. Behavioral health support, assessing patients and trying to understand what is going on with them that might lead to aggression, or what's happening in our environment that might contribute to aggression. Um, uh, uh, I would say metal detectors or weapons detection is another piece. That's not typically the violence we're seeing. We're seeing much more of the violence, physical violence from patients, families. We're seeing even bullying and incivility in our workplaces. But boy, you sure don't want someone to get into your organization with a gun. So I think, that's another facet. But again, it's not the answer. So there's assessment, there's training, there's facility, there's understanding your facility. Where are the blind spots? Where parking lots? How do we provide safety there? So really understanding that. There's the relationship piece of working with your security folks, working with the whole team, developing care plans for patient in those circumstances, identifying and then developing. There's working with your local law enforcement. If you really do have an incident where you need for them to come in, you've got to have those strong relationships. There's reporting so that we can look at data to say where are things happening and what are the trends and what might we be able to do differently. And then there are things like the mobile duress where we can alert others to come to our assistance and really mitigate harm from occurring. So they're just a few things, but it's a multifactorial piece. And we still need more research to determine what really makes a difference. My biggest advice in this and in use of any type of technology is to engage nurses at the front line in the discussions, because we've all been in situations where we believe we've got a great solution, but you talk to the people that are there and they say, well, that won't work because X, Y, or Z. Engage people early and they will have some excellent ideas for what needs to be done too. Combine that with the evidence and put together all those facets and you could have a very comprehensive program.
Yeah, and I think just to double up on this, I think we had this conversation as part of during the AONL conference, that I think at the end, it starts with the top around a culture that puts safety and security sort of front and center. And why? Because you don't do that, you'll not be able to attract the talent that you need in order to continue serving the communities and providing care. And I think I don't know exactly kind of who made that statement, but I've been using it internally a lot. It's almost a little bit like if you're a technology company and you invest heavily in cybersecurity and security internally, it's just like I have to review things on a daily, weekly, whatever basis, and because of that, it creates the awareness. And I think a whole bunch of what are the incidents going on, and we're not talking just about the things on the extreme, but creating a culture where if there is something, raise your hand, and we are logging it, and we're taking care of it, and we're addressing things. I think from the health systems we've been working with, and it's now protecting sort of staff members in the tens to hundreds of thousands, right? I think that is probably from an organizational transformation point of view, the most important thing that needs to sort of happen in the C-suite, and then can be trickled down to all sorts of programs, embrace technology, process, policy, in order to address that.
You know what? I think that, Philip, that's the key. That's where you start. Because number one, there's a business case for this. We know that people leave work environments where they don't feel safe. The cost of turnover is tremendous. It's the right thing to do for starters, but the business case is clearly there. And senior leadership has to be invested because they have to help identify the resources too.
I know, but
And
this is,
as
go ahead.
No, so I think there's turnover. The impact on patients, if people don't feel safe, is tremendous. That can impact your quality outcomes. There's so many, yet let alone the workers' comp cost that are involved. So there is truly a business case that can be made. And then there's also that value of saying we value our caregivers. I think we learned during the pandemic. We've known for years that healthy work environments and a very healthy workforce and a workforce that feels safe is critical to our mission of providing, great patient care and taking care of people. But it hit us really hard in the pandemic, where it was just so obvious that we were not going to be able to care for people if we did not have a healthy, safe workforce.
Yeah, what I was jumping onto is, you will be surprised, however, how many CNOs I've had conversations with where the conversation goes along the lines of, I fully agree, I wish we would be doing this, but we don't have the budget, we don't have the time to dedicate more resources and investment into programs as such. And at the end, like, my observation has been the organizations that have been adopting comprehensive workplace violence prevention programs that include technology, as part of it, it comes somewhere from, the C-suite, where there is sort of that buy-in, and it's almost like the CEO is personally asking for, where are we with this? If that awareness doesn't exist, it can be a much more difficult approach for nursing leadership or physical security sort of leadership.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of organizations, if someone is hurt at work, like the CEO should be looking at that should be seeing that data. Many organizations, they're aware of that when it happens. It's really very transparent. Most hospital boards now, everyone has a quality and safety. Maybe not everyone, but most organizations have a quality and safety committee of their board. And you can't look at patient safety without looking at employee, teammate, nurse, all care provider safety. So I do think that these issues, it's very important for the CNO to continue to raise them up, ensuring that we're coupling this. It's about overall safety. It's not just about patient safety or healthcare provider safety. It's got to be both together. As they say, you can't have one without the other. So,
yeah. So let's elevate the conversation and go back to sort of this topic of more patient contact time and reducing mundane workflows, for nursing. I think the entire concept of what we do at Kontakt.io, or what our ambition is we want to be that intelligent orchestration layer that helps around all sorts of things that touch the operational aspect of delivering care, the non-clinical work. And the idea obviously is that location information, in knowing not just where a staff member or a nurse is in the moment of an incident, but understanding where a patient is at the entire time from admission to discharge, understanding how resources like medical equipment is being utilized and where things are available and where they're not, understanding how space and the economic units of analysis, from the bed to the OR to the radiology, and even in the outpatient setups, the exam rooms, how things are being utilized, is first and foremost not helping the CFO and just improving sort of financial metrics around doing more with less or improving capacity. It is first and foremost helping the people that are doing the work spend their time more effectively with the patient at hand, and not walking around looking for equipment, or not rounding a room and only finding out then that the patient is currently in the cafeteria, or not walking into the same room when the nurse call is activated and you have 3 nurses at the same time wanting to check in. I mean, all of these workflows, if we type of start thinking about what's the benefit of combining location data with existing information, and then obviously applying AI to it, is fundamental to, I think, how the nurse sort of experience can be elevated. And so often when we are on RFPs and we are in conversation that are specifically around staff safety, I always say, okay, we're going to spend 10 minutes talking about staff safety, because that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to address. But there is so much more pain that we can take away once we get into. But I want you to kind of comment, because I'm obviously, singing my own song here. But from your perspective, like, how meaningful is this?
I mean, anything that anything that doesn't contribute more complexity for the nurse, I'm in favor of. So I do think it's about what type of platform, what type of systems can you bring together that don't cause extra work? Because I do think in the past, when we've seen something that looks like it will reduce some of the tasks or some of the things that nurses don't need to do, or make their role facilitated in some way, we've added things on, and things don't always coordinate together. So, you hear people say, well, I got to carry this and I got to carry that, and I got a button and I got this. That's too complex. So I do think that looking at multiple use certainly for location devices, but looking at that holistically is really important. But it has to be something that does not add additional steps for the nurse at the bedside. So how does it integrate with the care? So that really involves mapping out what people are doing, what they might be doing differently in the future. The other piece with AI, we're not really sure right now where that's going. There's some different things that are happening with listening and documentation, those type of things. But I do think that AI that helps nurses to prioritize, if the patient's not in their room, then you don't need to go into that room. You need to go somewhere else. So helping people prioritize throughout the day, both by clinical condition and also by what's happening on the unit. We have sometimes in the hospital setting, we have very large units. So knowing what's happening in different areas is really helpful. Again, everything has to come together and not add additional work. But I do think that anything that can reduce those tasks or facilitate or help communicate so that the nurse has the information they need to provide care for patients and can spend more time with patients and families, that reduces spending time with families, reduces workplace violence too. If you're able to spend your time communicating and educating, it makes a world of difference in terms of your patient-family interaction too. So there's lots of benefits. Again, I would say engaging people in that. And lastly, anything that we can do to support frontline leaders. Managers also have the same, they might be doing something different, but they have the same type of issues where they're doing a lot of tasks, a lot of roles that potentially could be done in a different way so that they were not spending quite as much time. We're making headway in that, payroll and time scheduling, all of that, but we're not quite there yet. And that role is so critical to the functioning of the unit, to the satisfaction of the nurses working on that unit and their own development.
Yeah, listen, I have one follow-up question for you, and it's a very hypothetical question, but I'm keen to get your take on it. Assuming, yeah, for a second, a hospital adopts all of this, stuff that organizations like Kontakt.io provide, ambient listening, virtual nursing, whatever. Like you now have sort of, the hospital of the future, you have it today. What's your prediction or target of how much time a nurse should be spending with patient? And I'm specifically, when I'm saying this, I'm thinking of this, I think it's a 2017, McKinsey study that hasn't really changed ever since, that as of today, it's 25% patient contact time, 75% administrative tasks. And that goes, they sum up everything that is not spending time with patients into that bucket. And when I read this, for the first time, I'm always saying, okay, it should be the other way around. But like, at what point do we get there? And then what's the implications? Yeah.
I don't know what the percentage should be, because it should be certainly reversed in some way, that you're spending more time with the patient than you are on documentation and those types of things. I think the issue is it depends on the patient and the patient's needs too. So it's not going to be the same for every patient. I think if I was a patient in a hospital feeling relatively well, I don't know that I'd want someone there all the time either. So it's really being able to have the nurse feel that they can spend the time that they need with the patients they're caring for. And that's going to vary by patients. And many times right now, people don't feel that they're able to do that in the way they would like to. Yep. So anything that we can bring to bear on that allows them, it's the nursing judgment piece. And it's that feeling that I really need to do X, Y, or Z, or that family needs me to really spend a lot of time with them, and I am unable to do that right now, and that just creates a lot of stress for nurses.
And this is such an excellent point, because my last hospital visit was, or as a patient, was roughly a year ago when my wife gave birth here in New York City. It was an amazing hospital. But obviously, if I'm in a hospital for, these 2-3 days, in my role right now, I'm constantly like observing and looking, and I get in trouble with my wife because she tells me,
take out your notebook and start taking notes.
Interviewing people while being, in the hospital. But what I've observed, and I'll show you the notes next time we meet, is I've documented every single time we called for the nurse, right? And what was the reason? And roughly, I think, within the first 12 hours after giving birth, okay, there were like all sorts of different things. But then for sort of the remaining, I want to say 48 hours or so, it was predominantly asking for follow-ups, like when can we get discharged? Where are we with the lab results that, we thought should have been here right now? So it's almost, as you can say, it was patient contact time that we were enforcing, but it was the wrong patient contact time, because for what we do for this the CNO and the CIO of one of the health systems we're working with is we're doing the patient experience screen, that we actually use the credentials of like the badge when you're entering the patient room. We provide the information sort of to the patient, who was the last person that came in, when is the most the next rounding visit going to occur. And ideally, we're elevating some of these questions, hence reducing the amount of time I would have to spend in that specific amount of time with nurses, and hence, however, also freeing up staff to truly focus on the critical path for someone else, right?
Right. So, for example, the patient next door who just had her first child, because I know you had your second, right?
Yeah,
Who
very
just
good.
had their first child might need really significant help with learning how to breastfeed, for example. And, then you may not have needed that. So it depends on the patient, but not being able to spend that time, it really is a very stressful thing for nurses.
Yeah, and listen, my second question for you was, both in your experience, having led, nurses directly, but also now as you're connected, to dozens of health systems, and you're in continuous exchange. Like, what's your read on the adoption of AI, specifically from a nursing leadership point of view?
Yeah,
And
it's a great question. And I think, one thing we're finding is that people need to define what they mean by AI, because many times some of the things like predictive analytics, is that really AI? What is this and how are we going to be able to use it? So most organizations that I'm involved in have a very specific group that is focused on this, really looking at the ethical use of AI and bringing a team together, because certainly if you implement something in one place, we know it could potentially affect others. I think people are aware that things are going to change probably rapidly, but they're approaching it very thoughtfully. So I think right now that what we're looking at is we're looking at the current environment and how we can do just what we've been talking about, reduce some of that friction, free up time, really allow people to do the jobs they want to do. What I think people are thinking is then, 5 years from now, what's going to look different? Will there be more technology? Will we be having AI doing much more of the work? But we don't really know where that's heading right yet. So I think it's to me it's an unknown. And again, engaging people, educating people so that the fear of new technology and of AI is not there is going to be a really important piece. I don't know that we have I was just talking with someone about this. We don't have a strong knowledge base yet of what AI is going to be able to do. We just know that potential's out there. So I think in the near future, it's going to be reducing friction points, making things more efficient, and that's going to be great. But then the next step, I think, is what we're a little unclear about.
Yeah, and I mean, I've asked that question very deliberately, because if I take sort of an inside perspective of what we do, is, being in the business of intelligently orchestrating sort of resources, scheduled stuff, and understanding how do we, right level and tell sort of the right person to be at the right point in time with the right patient and the right resources. I mean, it's an optimization problem, it's scheduling problem. I think the excitement that is currently out in the market around agentic AI, which independent of the technical kind of reasoning capabilities, that now allows you to work against a set of objectives rather than very rigid rules that you had to predefine in a very deterministic fashion, often involves the interface of a voice-based agent, right? And I think through sort of the ChatGPT and type of other experiences, we're experiencing in all different domains right now, that the type of chatbot experience that when you call Delta or something, from 5 years ago, was meh at best, and everybody was like trying to say support, so you actually get to the human as fast as possible. But with the reasoning capabilities improving, these type of experiences are suddenly an emotion that I'm sometimes getting, these inbound sales messages and sales calls, and I have caught myself not knowing that this call was just
Yes.
done from an AI-based agent, because they've become so good, which is in essential is the Turing test, right? Like, we are not capable of immediately distinguishing, is this a human or is it some AI? And I feel sort of that as a support function for not just health system currently applying it to taking care of patient scheduling, of
Right.
things that are happening within billing and invoicing, but as assistants to nurses in where should I focus on? Who do I work with, next? And rather than logging in and looking at dashboards and consuming data in a way that we've always been consuming it, I think there's a strong hypothesis, at least that we are having, that this is going to change. But I'm deliberately
I
calling out
agree.
the hypothesis because we still need to see that evolving. But I think what I have found exciting is that historically, healthcare and hospitals have always been, a slower adopter of technology. And
I
what
would agree
feels
with
it's
that.
almost
Yeah.
reversed right now, right? That there's a very strong appetite. There's not a single, CIO I'm not meeting where the conversation is almost like, how can I protect myself from the C-suite that comes with all these AI wishes and
Yeah.
desires and requests, and how can we make sense out of it because I only have so much hours in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for nurses, the prime piece of nursing, I mean, we're a science-based profession, but we are based on caring. We're based on caring for human beings. And so, that's the relationship, and spending time being able to develop that's going to be important. But there are probably things that we hold very dear that we think only we can do that would be able to be done in another way. And I think that's what we have to determine. What are those other things that potentially artificial intelligence could play a role in? And I don't know that we know the answer to that yet, but it's not, I really worry that people feel that this is all about taking jobs away from people. And, it's really about augmenting, knowing we may not have enough nurses in the future anyway, but it's about augmenting the work and helping nurses be able to focus on the things that are truly those things that only a nurse can do.
Yeah. And I think within the domain of nursing, I think that argument holds stronger than probably in any other profession because
Yeah.
of all the things we have initially discussed at the beginning of, chatting around workplace violence. There's so many, nurses and leaving the profession. There is a shortage. Like those are like real
Big
problems, and they're
things.
not
Yeah.
unique to, the US or the East Coast of the US. You go, to Germany where I initially grew up, it's the exact same thing. I mean, it's the number one like
Oh,
problem.
yeah. This is a universal global issue, and reflective of a lot of things in our society right now. And we can do some things. I think, the statistics as well as I do. All of the studies that have been done, 8 in 10 nurses have experienced violence in some way. Over half talk about that they've experienced violence in the past year alone. It's not always physical violence, though that's the one we hear about because the outcomes are very visible, but it's intimidation, it's bullying, it's incivility, it's being yelled at. It's all these things are cumulative, and we really need a call to action. We need a call to action from leadership throughout our country, throughout the world, to say we've got to put into place the things that we know work, and we've got to find those other things that do work. So yeah, we talked about two things today. We've talked about, that the safety piece, and then the overall piece of how other types of technology can assist nursing, both now, which I think it can definitely help right now, but also what are those potentials in the future?
Yep. Listen, I think that's an amazing comment of yours to sum it all up. I think I can only say, from my end, representing Kontakt.io, our ambition and our mission is to sort of become that platform that helps care operations run in the most seamless way possible. And I think to do that, we need to focus on the caregiver. We need to focus on the experience. We need to focus on, what needs to happen so that they feel empowered and heard and seen to do the job. And I think safety is a foundation, but as the term foundation, insists, there's so much more on top that at the end, moves away the time being spent on all the things that don't create value to patient care that ultimately does two things. It creates better outcomes and it reduces waste and the cost that is affiliated with an ever increasing and becoming more expensive type of health system, which if we zoom out and we quote our friend Eric Larson, is one of the most fundamental economic problems that we're running. If the cost of care continues to increase at the same pace it's been increasing over the last 20, 30 years, it's
sustainable.
not sustainable anymore, and it's going to erode some of the social fabric, and that cannot happen. And so we need to address it.
And how can technology help with that? And again, I
sorry,
absolutely.
now I jumped into my emotional sort of pitch and closing statement, but Mary Beth,
Well,
thank
I'm
you
just
so much.
thrilled that Kontakt.io is focused on this, is addressing it, both the foundational safety and then the broader issue of how can you have multiple use cases for technology that doesn't increase the complexity of the environment. It helps with the nurses. So happy to
A lot of work to
happy
do.
to
There's
be
a
a part of that.
lot of things, a lot of use cases that need to get consolidated, but that's why we're here. We have a time to address, and I think the wind is blowing in the right sort of direction. So I know, Andy, you kind of disappeared, but I assume this won't be our last chat. I mean, I'm continuing chatting with Mary Beth anyway, but if you want to tune in again one day, you're more than welcome.
I thought it was a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Mary Beth. To recap in some ways, staff safety is table stakes. And what can we do to empower and support nurses and caregivers beyond staff duress badges? Thank you both again.
Thank you.
We'll continue this
But
conversation
they're still
another.
important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And thank you again, Philip and Mary Beth. Take care.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Mary Beth.